Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes a good argument for being just, doing good in the world and ethical business practices, because you know what? The things will get around eventually otherwise, if not, so in unexpected ways. So a little bit of my bonus mindset tip as we get started here. So let's start out having you tell us about how you made the transition then from being a musician and then to a music marketer and then to an internet entrepreneur. It's kind of an interesting journey there.
Yeah, it is. And I was actually probably an entrepreneur before I was a musician, because I believe that entrepreneurs we're born that way. I was an entrepreneur, the kind of guy who had everybody else running his paper route, and then I was taking a piece off of every one of them. So I was doing that fairly early. But I also grew up in Nashville, which means that I was basically born with a guitar in my hands. And that came along pretty much about the same time, and it seemed to me to be a pretty cool gig, being a musician, or at least what I thought being a musician was, where I would hang around, play songs, and get women and that kind of thing. But I knew from being in Nashville, the business end of it, I knew that if I had to make it in the business, I would have to have the business element of it. And I went to school for music business, commercial music, and that was kind of my first official thing in the music business, because I knew I was going to have to, I knew that basically my music talent wasn't there. That's what I'm trying to get at. There are a lot of great guitarists in Nashville. I was not one of them. I had the entrepreneur thing in me. And the transition came really when I was able to have a mediocre band packing people in, and people were like, what is this guy doing? And other bands would come to me and ask for advice on what I was doing to pack people in. And it just became a business, just a way for me to make extra money for amps and guitars and things.
Right. Yeah, in Nashville, where your cab driver is probably a better guitarist than you are. It's just like
Absolutely.
Everybody is a stellar musician. And I very much relate with your story, because my band, and realizing like just because I make cool music that I think is cool doesn't mean people are going to show up. And so marketing's important. And thank goodness that led me to realize it's like, wow, this marketing thing's pretty cool, and I enjoy it. I'm actually kind of good at it. So let's, so that it's, similar out there as well.
Well, see, but not only that, it's just the opposite, too. What I found out when I was working in the business, and similar to my own experience, is some of the guys that are really successful aren't necessarily the best musicians.
Right.
They just had the mindset, which we're going to get into, but also the work ethic. So I was like, wait a minute. This is not about the music, or it's not even really about the songs. I mean, you turn on the radio, it's like, how did this stuff get here? She can't even sing. And, that can be fixed. We can airbrush you. We can auto-tune you. We can pitch. There's a joke in Nashville. We say, boys, don't bother tuning those guitars. We'll fix them in the mix. And that's true. Studio time's expensive. That's the joke. So, really everything has to do with mindset. And that was really the first place that I saw it.
Very cool.
Well, what advice would you give to somebody who's kind of at the point where they have an idea and they want to give internet business a try, but yet, maybe they talk themselves out of even taking action to see if that idea would even be a success?
That's a really good question, because I believe, again, if you've got the entrepreneur spirit in you, if you have this idea, it's going to keep coming around, and it's going to come around, and it's going to come around. It's kind of like a lesson that you learned that you should have learned a long time ago, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it gets bigger, and the damage is worse. If you've got an idea inside of you, it's going to keep coming around. Like maybe you'll say, well, I'm going to try this job out, but that idea is still, it's like an itch you can't scratch. And I think it's important to listen to your intuition, and you get better at it as you go along. But initially, maybe you are starting to ignore it because, we're all around a bunch of naysayers. That's just how it is. I mean, even if you have the most supportive family in your world, the whole world, it seems to be like, nope, you can't do this. You can't be a musician. You can't sit at home and work in your pajamas. People don't do that. Well, you've got to work hard. I mean, look at the stuff that we've been programmed with since we have been born. You've got to work hard. You've got to work hard. You've got to work hard. And I do believe that there's some effort that you've got to put in it, but we've got to get around that. So I don't really blame people for not really jumping out and doing this thing at first. But the thing is that voice gets a little bit louder for the people that are entrepreneurs, and a little bit louder and a little bit louder. And it gets to the point where you just can't stand anymore. And we can talk maybe more later about, how I quit my final day job, because it was a huge blowout. I went out with the lid off. Security was called. I mean, it was a massive thing because I just could not stand it anymore. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are like that. But for now, my advice would be to take baby steps. Just keep thinking about it. Let it simmer. Maxwell Maltz, I don't know if you've ever read these books. There's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Uh-huh. Jay, I know you're a fan of Dan Kennedy because I know you just spoke at his event, but Dan Kennedy actually has done some stuff with Maxwell Maltz called The New Psycho-Cybernetics.
Oh,
but he talks about, have you heard it?
Oh, yeah.
So you guys are familiar with it. Most people that are familiar with mindset are, it's right up there with Think and Grow Rich to me. And he talks about the servo mechanism. And basically you put out the idea to your servo mechanism and it will figure the things out for you. So if you just keep thinking about this, it might not work in its current state, but you'll tweak it a little bit. And pretty soon it's just going to be boiling over to where you know it's going to be a success. And you get out there, and if it's not, you're going to tweak it some more, and it will be.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly how it happened for me. I was a big fan of the Think and Grow Rich and the old Psycho-Cybernetics, but I mean, they're very, very similar. But at the time I read The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was working in a career very similar to music. It's the film world. So I was in LA working in that business. And I was doing what I thought I was going to do. And it's funny, once I read that Rich Dad, Poor Dad and realized that entrepreneurial vision of wanting to, have this business and be in charge and this stuff, it took me a little while just because I was very well paid in that industry. And then I finally got my dream job that I'd been working for 10 years or something. And I finally got to Warner Brothers. And within a month and a half, you said blowout. I didn't quite have a blowout, but I did get to hear the famous lines that you hear in movies about Hollywood. You'll never work in this town again. You'll never work at Warner Brothers again because, I was one of the youngest guys to get the job. And, when I said a month in, oh, you know what, I'm going to go start my own business. They're like, you can never work here again, right? Like, you don't leave here. And I just had to do it. Like you said, I had that thing going, look, I have to at least go try to make this work. And at the time I didn't realize that really it's just you keep doing it until it works. But, and along the way I figured that out and just kept going because I kind of cut that, I broke the bridge. I couldn't go back. So I had to make it work.
Well, I was just going to mention that. They say, when you're basically, you want to be on a highway with no exits where you don't have another option. Because then you're going to work harder and you're going to make it work. Because when you have plan B, you use plan B.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, and that's exactly what I did. I just got to the point where I think subconsciously I was like, I just can't stand this. So I've got to ruin my reputation so bad within this company or within this job. Now, this is a job I'd worked 4 days. I mean, that's how bad it was. I mean, it was just that intense, and it just came over me because every time I would walk in the door, I'd hear this elevator door slam. I felt it was like a jail. I said, I can't stand this anymore. I'm going to kill myself. And it was very, very scary. But I remember walking out of the parking garage or driving out, and it's this dark parking garage and seeing that light. And there was just something that overcame me. I said, I know that it's going to be okay because that had been simmering in me. In my story, what I was telling myself, I was like, I am going to make this work. I'm not going to do it. Because I probably had 20 failed attempts, where I work a job, I'd make some money, then I'd quit. I'd try to do it on my own. But then I'd get scared. It wasn't because I needed to go back, but I'd go back to a job just because I got scared. I said, I'm just going to see what happens if I make this thing work. And I'm just going to trust it, that it is going to work. And I've had some very, very scary times, but it's always, always worked. I've still got scary times. And now I'm fortunate that I've got a little history that I can work on, that I can look back on and say, well, you've done this 10, 15 years. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that actually leads me to another question is that maintenance of a consistent success mindset. I mean, let's say somebody does decide to give it a try, whether it's the big blowout or whether it's just like, okay, it's just nothing dramatic, but it's like, okay, I want to give this a try, or they start letting it have place in their mind. Maybe they read a book, they go to a workshop, they get really pumped. But then, there's always those times, like you said, even, that have been doing this for several years, still hit those hard moments. The moment that you encounter something hard or you perceive that you've had a failure, that motivation can deflate. So what are some things that have helped you maintain that success mindset consistently?